My name is Madison Hale, and sometimes when I look back on where I started, it feels like I'm watching someone else's life instead of my own. I grew up in Redmond Springs, a quiet town in the Midwest of America where people still waved at each other from their porches and where the biggest excitement each year was the local fair. Our house stood at the edge of a long dirt road, its white paint slowly peeling as the years went by. No matter how many summer storms beat against it or how many winters buried it in snow, it remained steady and familiar. The front porch had a small wooden swing that groaned with age, and when the wind lifted it, the soft squeak always sounded like an old friend whispering secrets to me. Even though the house was far from perfect, a part of me loved it simply because it shaped who I became, but another part of me always felt like I didn't quite belong inside its walls. My parents, Evelyn and Mark, were not bad people, but they were not gentle ones either. They believed life was a ladder where only a few chosen people had the right to climb. To them, my sister Clara was one of those people. Clara was the star of our family, the girl who moved through life as if everything came naturally to her. She was smart, charming, and enrolled in a polished university on the East Coast, something my parents bragged about to anyone who would listen. They acted as if her very existence proved their success as parents, and they never missed a chance to remind me of the difference between us. I was not the mistake child, but I was the one who didn't shine, the one who blended in, the one they believed would never rise above average. Life in Redmond Springs was slow, but the pressure inside our house never was. Every report card, every test, every milestone turned into a comparison. Clara did this when she was your age, my mother would say with a sigh. Clara never struggled in school, my father would add. Their voices became a soundtrack I knew too well, one that echoed in my ears even when they weren't speaking. I learned early to hide my hopes and plans because I knew how quickly they could crush them with just one disappointed look. During my second year of college, everything changed in one night. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same place where so many of my failures had been listed like grocery items. The overhead light flickered a little, as if unsure whether it wanted to stay on, and the room smelled faintly of the chili my mother had made earlier. My parents sat across from me with matching serious expressions, the kind that warned me something bad was coming. My mother folded her hands, her wedding ring catching the light. My father cleared his throat, the way he always did before saying something heavy. "We've made a decision," my mother finally said, her voice calm in that unsettling way that meant the decision was already final. "We can't afford to keep paying your tuition anymore. We have to devote our resources to Clara now. Her program is demanding, and she needs the support." I stared at them, not sure if I'd heard correctly. I felt the words hit me like a cold wave. My father nodded as though he was doing me a favor by saying it out loud. "You'll figure things out," he added. "Maybe this will be good for you. You can learn from your sister and understand what real hard work looks like." What struck me hardest was how little emotion they showed. They were not sad. They were not apologetic. They were simply done with me, and they believed ending their support would teach me humility. They thought I'd fall. They expected it. They wanted me to accept that mediocrity was my path, and that Clara's success was the only one worthy of investment. But what they didn't know, what I had carefully kept to myself for months, was that I had already begun to build something of my own. It started as a late-night curiosity, a small online project I nurtured quietly while they slept, using the dim light of my desk lamp to guide me. Over time it grew into something real, something profitable, something mine. I was already earning $20,000 a month online, more money than I had ever dreamed of touching at my age. I had worked for it, learned for it, sacrificed sleep for it, and I did it without anyone cheering for me. But I didn't tell them that night. I didn't throw the truth in their faces or rush to prove them wrong. Instead, I sat there silently, letting them believe whatever they wanted. I realized then that their faith had never been mine to earn because they never offered it in the first place. So instead of fighting, I nodded, pretending to be the disappointed daughter they imagined me to be. I let them think they held power over my future, even though I had already created a future they could not even imagine. After the conversation ended, I went to my old bedroom. The walls still held the fading posters I'd taped up years ago, and the smell of the dusty carpet somehow felt comforting that night. I sat on my bed and stared at the chipped paint near the window. The house felt smaller than it ever had, like it was gently pushing me to leave. My heart hurt, but beneath that hurt, something hard and bright began to form. Determination. A promise. A fire that their disbelief could no longer extinguish. I whispered to myself softly, the same way I used to talk to the moon when I was little. One day, I'll walk out of here for good. And when I do, I won't be returning as the girl they think I am. That night, I packed in silence, not because I was being forced out, but because I was choosing to walk forward. My life was waiting beyond the limits of Redmond Springs, beyond the doubts of my parents, beyond the shadow of Clara. For the first time, I felt the weight of my own power, and it was steadier than anything they had ever given me. And that was the moment my story truly began. Leaving Redmond Springs felt like stepping out of an old photograph. The edges of that life were worn, faded, and too tight around me. As the bus pulled away and the familiar houses shrank in the distance, I felt both fear and relief moving through me like twin currents. I had no clear plan other than the one I'd built in secret. Keep growing my online work, keep believing in myself even when my parents never did. I chose Sterling Heights, a lively city in Colorado that I had once seen in a travel magazine. Its tall glass buildings and wide, open streets had called to me in a way no place ever had. And when I arrived, stepping into air so crisp it felt like a first breath, I knew I had chosen right. My new home was a tiny studio apartment near Pinebrook Avenue, squeezed between a coffee shop called Luna's Cup and a small bookstore run by an elderly man named Harold Benton. The studio wasn't much. It hardly fit my bed and the secondhand desk I bought from a thrift store, but it was the first place I ever lived that felt like mine. The walls were bare. The window overlooked an alley filled with old brick, and the heater made a constant clicking sound, but none of that mattered. I could breathe there. I could think. I could grow. During those first months, my life fell into a rhythm. Mornings started with the smell of roasted beans drifting up from Luna's Cup, and evenings ended with me hunched over my laptop, the small lamp beside me casting a warm circle of light that felt like a quiet companion. My business, the one I had built piece by piece, began to rise in ways that felt almost unreal. At first, I earned a steady $20,000 a month, then slowly the numbers crept higher, $22,000, $24,000, even $25,000 during months, when everything aligned. What I loved most wasn't the money, it was the independence. Every dollar was something I created. No one could claim they helped me. No one could dismiss me as average. I had done this with nothing but determination and late-night research sessions. I taught myself everything. How to design websites that businesses loved, how to write ads that made customers stop scrolling, how to manage clients from different states and time zones. It wasn't easy, and there were nights I was too tired to keep my eyes open, but I pushed through because I finally felt like I was building a life worth living. People began to notice my work. Clients sent referrals. My inbox filled with messages from companies in Boston, Denver, and Charlotte, all wanting help with their branding. Each new project felt like one more brick in the foundation of the life I had promised myself. I still lived in that little studio, still ate cheap takeout on nights I forgot to cook, but I felt rich, not in dollars but in possibility. A year passed faster than I expected, and one evening, as I stared around my cramped apartment, I realized I had outgrown it. Not just physically, but emotionally. The girl who first arrived in Sterling Heights was scared and uncertain, but now I stood stronger, more confident, ready for something bigger. The thought of buying a home, something my parents believed I would never do, formed quietly in my mind. At first, it scared me. Buying a house was something people did when they had families, or steady jobs, or parents who guided them. But then I remembered. I had guided myself. I had become my own support system. And I was ready. I contacted a local real estate agent named Victor Lang, a kind man with salt and pepper hair and a calm voice that made every complicated detail feel simple. He showed me several houses, some too small, some too worn, some too loud with nearby traffic. But then we drove to Willow Crest Lane, a quiet street lined with tall maple trees and soft green lawns. At the very end stood a slate-gray house with wide windows that captured the sunlight like they were collecting hope. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something settle inside me, something that felt like belonging. The living room had warm wooden floors that reflected the morning light. The kitchen was open and bright, with white counters that made me imagine cooking meals I'd never had time for. The bedrooms felt peaceful, like each one held a quiet promise. I walked from room to room in silence, my heart beating faster with each step. "Do you like it?" Victor asked gently. I didn't like it. I loved it. And love, I realized, was enough to make a decision. When Victor told me the price, $480,000, my breath caught in my chest. It was a huge number. But then he looked at me with a small smile and said, "You know, Madison, most people your age would take out loans or wait years before even thinking of a house like this. But you did something impressive." His words sank into me deeper than he knew. I didn't wait. I transferred the payment. I bought that house. Cash. The day the keys were handed to me, I stood on the porch for a long moment, the weight of the metal resting in my palm. The sky above Sterling Heights was a soft blue, streaked with gold as evening approached. The street was quiet except for the sound of leaves rustling from the gentle breeze. And as I turned the key in the lock for the first time, the door swung open with the kind of welcome I had never received from my childhood home. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the windows, laying warm stripes across the floor. I walked through the empty rooms, hearing nothing but the soft echo of my own footsteps. For a moment, I stopped in the center of the living room, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "Madison, you did it." Those 3 words washed over me like a soft wave, lifting years of doubt from my shoulders. I had built something no one believed I could. I had created a life far from the one my parents imagined for me. And more importantly, I had done it alone. That night, I sat on the floor of my new home, leaning back against the bare wall, eating a simple sandwich because I hadn't bought furniture yet. But I didn't need anything more. The emptiness didn't feel lonely. It felt like potential. A wide, open future waiting to be filled. In that quiet moment, I promised myself one thing. This house would be the place where I rebuilt my life completely, piece by piece, without anyone telling me who I should be. The first few months in my new home on Willow Crest Lane were some of the quietest and most peaceful moments I'd ever known. I spent my mornings opening the tall windows to let in the soft Colorado light, and my evenings sitting on the living room floor, imagining how I would decorate each room. For once, life didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel like a competition or a punishment. It simply felt like mine. I filled my days with work I loved, warm cups of coffee from Luna's cup, and long walks through Sterling Heights as the sun set behind the distant hills. I didn't think much about Redmond Springs, and I certainly didn't think much about the people I'd left behind. But one evening, just as I finished answering the last email of the day, my phone lit up with my father's name. At first, I hesitated, letting it ring several times, trying to decide whether I wanted the past to invade my new life. Eventually, I answered. "Madison," my father said, not bothering with a greeting. His voice was sharp in a way I recognized instantly. "When are you coming home? Your mother and I need to talk to you." There was no warmth, no curiosity, no acknowledgement that I had built something for myself. Only impatience, only expectation. "I'm doing fine here," I said calmly. "There's nothing I need from home." My father scoffed softly. "Clara is graduating early, you know. She's accomplishing more than ever. You should come back, watch her, learn from her. She's setting an example, and you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Even after everything, he still thought Clara's achievements were the center of the universe. He still saw me as the daughter who needed guidance, discipline, correction. He couldn't imagine that I might be succeeding in ways beyond his understanding. Instead of arguing, I simply said, "Why don't you and Mom come to Sterling Heights? I want to show you something." There was a long pause, as if the request didn't fit into the version of me he kept in his mind. But after a moment, he agreed.
Fine.
We'll come this weekend. When the weekend arrived, I spent the morning cleaning my already spotless house. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted the moment to be as clear and sharp as possible. Every room was filled with sunlight, the hardwood floors were polished, and the keys rested proudly on the kitchen counter. The air smelled faintly of vanilla from a candle I'd lit earlier, something warm and inviting, something I knew my childhood home never was. When I saw their car pull up to my driveway, my heart tightened, not from fear but from a deep, steady resolve. My mother stepped out first, wearing a pale blue coat I'd never seen before. My father followed, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something harder to read. They stood at the edge of the walkway, staring up at the house as if it were a castle instead of a clean, simple Colorado home. You live here?" my mother asked, her voice small with disbelief. "Yes," I said, opening the door and stepping out onto the porch. "I do." My father looked around slowly, his eyes scanning the trimmed yard, the stone path, the tall windows. His face tightened with confusion. "How?" he asked. "You weren't working. You didn't have the means. How could you afford something like this?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the receipt, an official document showing the full payment I'd made, the $480,000 transferred from my account. I handed it to my father. His hands trembled as he read it. My mother covered her mouth, her eyes widening with shock. "You bought this?" she whispered. "With your own money?" "Yes," I said. "While you were telling me I'd never be anything." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. My mother's face went pale, and my father's eyes darted between me and the house, as if trying to piece together a puzzle he had never expected to exist. Their expressions shifted: shame, confusion, surprise, maybe even fear. For the first time in my life, I saw them speechless. My mother stepped closer, reaching out as if she wanted to touch my arm. "Madison, we're proud of you. Truly. You've done something incredible. We didn't realize you were." "No," I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. "Please don't say you're proud now. Not after everything." She froze, her hand lingering in the air before slowly dropping back to her side. My father cleared his throat, his voice softer now. "Can we come inside? We want to understand. We want to talk." But something inside me had changed, something deep and permanent. I wasn't the girl who had once begged them to see me. I wasn't the daughter who had lived for scraps of approval. I wasn't the one holding empty hands, waiting for love that was always conditional. I had built a life on my own, and now I had the right to protect it. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't believe in me then. And now it's too late." My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked away, his jaw tight. I knew they expected me to soften, to step aside and let them in, but opening that door would mean letting the past seep into my new life, and I couldn't let that happen. I stepped back and gently closed the door. Through the glass, I could still see their shapes, my mother crying, my father standing rigid beside her. Their disappointment no longer reached me the way it used to. Instead, a strange calmness washed over me, like a quiet shield settling around my heart. Inside my home, everything felt different now. Bigger, brighter, stronger. I leaned against the door for a moment, letting the silence fill me. My chest ached, but it wasn't the painful ache of losing something. It was the ache of becoming something. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their choices. I was making my own. I walked into the living room, sunlight warming the floor beneath my feet. This was my space, my achievement, my life. And closing the door on them wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of protection. A new chapter had already begun, and I was finally strong enough to write it myself. After the day I turned my parents away, the air around my new home felt different. It felt clearer, as if a long, invisible weight had lifted from my shoulders the moment the door shut. I knew the decision would follow me, echo inside me, but it also freed something I didn't realize had been trapped for so many years. For the first time in my life, I was standing on my own ground, choosing my own boundaries and protecting the person I had fought so hard to become. They came back the next morning, and the morning after that, and the one after. Some days, they arrived together. On others, only my mother stood there, knocking softly as if hoping I might mistake her for a stranger. I never answered. I knew their patterns, their rhythms, their strategies. My father tried logic, leaving notes beneath the welcome mat that said things like we were wrong, but we can fix this. My mother tried emotional pleas, scribbling messages like we love you. Please don't shut us out. But they didn't understand something important. I wasn't shutting them out to punish them. I was shutting them out to save myself. My sister Clara came once too. She arrived in the late afternoon, when the sun dipped lower and cast long shadows across Willow Crest Lane. I saw her through the glass pane of my door, her shoulders drawn tight, her fingers trembling as she knocked. When I didn't answer, she leaned closer, her voice barely carrying through the heavy wood. I didn't know they were so cruel to you, she whispered. I'm sorry, Madison. I placed my hand on the inside of the door, where hers rested on the other side. For a long moment, I let the truth sit between us, even though she couldn't hear it. She didn't know because she never had to know. She had been protected, shielded, guided. She had been chosen. I had been left behind, expected to rise only as far as their imagination allowed, which wasn't far at all. Eventually, I heard her steps retreat down the porch. I didn't open the door then either. I wasn't ready. Maybe one day, maybe never. Healing wasn't something I could rush, not after so many years of invisible bruises. Inside my home, life moved gently. I decorated slowly, choosing pieces that reflected warmth rather than expectation. The living room became my sanctuary. Soft cream walls, thick rugs that felt like clouds beneath my feet, and a deep blue couch that became my favorite place to unwind after long workdays. But the heart of the room was a painting I found in a small gallery in Brighton Harbor, a quiet coastal town I visited during my first self-funded vacation. The painting showed golden light dissolving into gray waves, colors that felt like the story of my own transformation. The artist, a woman who had traveled through Europe, told me she painted it during a moment of transition. I bought it without hesitation. It felt like a reminder that life could begin again, even after long storms. Evenings became the best part of my routine. I often sat on the front porch, letting the wind slip through the trees as the sky turned shades of lavender and soft orange. The quiet of Sterling Heights settled around me like a warm blanket. No yelling, no comparisons, no doubts whispered into my ears. Just calm, just peace, just the life I'd built. I made friends too, real ones, the kind who didn't expect anything from me except honesty. Lena, who owned the small bakery down the street, became one of the first people I let into my new world. She had a way of smiling that made strangers feel like regulars, and her cinnamon rolls were the type that melted on your tongue. We often sat on her shop patio in the early mornings, sipping coffee and talking about everything from work to dreams to the little joys no one ever taught me to cherish. And then there was Victor, the real estate agent who had found my house. He stopped by from time to time, not out of obligation, but genuine curiosity about how I was settling in. He always asked about my business, impressed with how quickly it continued to grow. He never made me feel judged, never made me feel small. He was one of the first people in my life to treat me as though I was capable simply because I was capable. Sterling Heights became more than a city. It became a home layered with choice rather than obligation. But the knocks at my door never truly stopped. Sometimes weeks passed in silence, and just when I began to believe my parents had moved on, I would hear it again, the firm rapping of my father's knuckles, the light trembling tap of my mother's fingers. They came during holidays, during quiet Sundays, even once during a rainstorm where they waited on my porch for nearly an hour. But I never opened it. Every time I heard them outside, I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, guilt, strength. Yet the strongest feeling was clarity. I wasn't angry anymore, and I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply choosing myself. I had spent so many years bending, shrinking, breaking just to fit their version of who I should be. Opening the door meant inviting that version back into my life, and I couldn't let that happen, not after everything I had built. Inside these walls, I grew into a person I actually liked. I became someone who made decisions based on my own voice, not the echo of someone else's disappointment. My business flourished month after month, reaching numbers that would have stunned the girl I used to be. I started donating to small organizations around Sterling Heights, supporting local art programs and women who wanted to build online careers like I had. I wanted others to know that success didn't come only to those who were chosen. It could come to those who chose themselves. Sometimes people asked if I regretted ending things with my family. The truth? No. What I regretted was how long I stayed hoping for the love I deserved. But not once did I regret walking away, because walking away was how I finally discovered who I was. I built a life with my own hands. I built a home no one thought I could ever own. I built me, piece by piece, with quiet courage and long nights and a belief that grew stronger every day. And now, every time someone knocks at my door, I decide who I let in. My parents may still stand outside, holding their apologies and their regrets like offerings, but that chapter of my life is closed, firmly, finally, completely. I am Madison. And this is my story.